I really don't know how to put this without appearing to be rude, but I promise you I'm not. But it is my opinion that the great British public are not stupid, and it appears to many people that this government, and for that matter the previous government, seems much more willing to give our money away than to spend it on those that really deserve it. And there's one or two things that have come out, interesting points of discussion that have come out of my previous videos of yesterday and the day before that I will come to in this video, because with respect, many people misunderstand or simply don't know the facts of the matter, and I wouldn't expect them to, which is why I create these videos for you. And on that note, if you are new to me, I'm Daniel Smith, a barrister of England and Wales, and for over 4 years now I've been bringing videos to you on the law, news, politics, current events and such like. And for many people that think that these current events and politics, etc., don't affect you or have nothing to do with the law, think again, because they very much do. These things have an effect upon everybody. And so I'd be really grateful if you subscribe. I think I'm one of the few people that are prepared to say things as they are, objectively, neutrally. I'll give you both sides, and now and again I'll give you my opinion, although I usually avoid doing that. You can subscribe to my other channel, Black Belt Secrets, for my personal opinions, and I also have another channel on money. That is Daniel Smith, linked in the description below. So thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate that. So what has spawned this video? Well, I've been reading through some comments, and people have been talking about the money spent here, there and everywhere and on everyone, but it would seem for many people throughout the UK that really deserve it. And I've been looking at some statistics and where the money goes, and there was another comment that somebody mentioned about legal migrants to the UK getting NHS services, and they said that is a benefit, but it's not free. And in fact, none of that is free, and it will stagger you as to what these things cost. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's have a look at one or two figures. For example, let's look at money spent in and on Ukraine. This is not to say that it is not a worthy cause or anything else. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this is where some of the money goes. Now, since the invasion by Russia, in total, the government official word on the matter is that the UK has committed £12.8 billion on Ukraine, 7.8 billion in military support and 5 billion in non-military support. And Keir Starmer has made it absolutely clear that that commitment to Ukraine is ongoing. And not only that, Keir Starmer has also recently announced £11 million in aid for Syria. Again, that's not to say that the aid money is a bad thing to help the people that do need it, but one does have to question the regime now in control of Syria, which still, as of this date, is a spur-off group of Al-Qaeda, which is still on the terror group of banned organisations by the UK. And Keir Starmer says there is no decision pending on removing this rebel group, because it is a rebel group that has essentially overthrown the regime of Assad. Now, however bad that regime was, it's been overthrown by rebels that are currently on a terror group list for the UK. So Keir Starmer says there is no decision pending to remove them from this banned list, and yet committing £11 million. And so that does raise the question, to which I don't really know the full answer, as to who exactly is controlling that money, where the money goes and how the money is being used, and ensuring that it is not literally in the hands of terrorists, because this is a terror group that is in control of Syria. What are they going to do? Have conversations and say, well, we'll give you this money as long as you promise not to spend it on bad things? That is a very legitimate question. But obviously, that is a lot of money spent, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. And that is not even talking about the £22 billion spent on this carbon capture stuff, you know, the stuff trees does, capturing carbon emissions, but only they're doing it with machinery of some sort. And coincidentally, it's £22 billion that matches the £22 billion black hole. But nonetheless, we won't get into that. But then we also talked in the last couple of days, in the last couple of videos, about asylum seekers coming to the UK. Now, again, this is not to say that there are not genuine asylum seekers who are genuinely fleeing war, genuinely need help, genuinely need support from another country. Although there are questions over why do they come from France? And some people believe that the vast majority are coming from France and the vast majority are economic migrants. Now, dealing with both of those, just to give you both sides of the picture, which is what I like to do, It is a bit of a myth that the vast majority come to the UK. In fact, the vast majority stay in France or wherever it is, and there is no legal obligation on them to claim asylum in the first safe country that they arrive in, though it does raise the question of why then move on. As it happens, according to what I read, the vast majority actually stay in France or elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that there are not, as there are, tens of thousands that are coming to the UK. And it leaves big open questions as to why they come here and are they not really economic migrants. Now, some of the reports, although they might be somewhat biased, I say maybe, I'm not saying they may be somewhat biased depending on who they're written by, that say that the vast majority of those coming to the UK are coming because of family connections. I personally somewhat doubt that, but I personally believe that a lot of them are actually coming here as economic migrants, and I personally believe that obviously I can't pull out a piece of paper to prove this to you, but I personally believe that it is entirely possible that a lot of them that are granted refugee status and asylum in the UK are actually economic migrants, and that they've perhaps been less truthful on their application. For example, that is entirely possible. No one can tell me that that is not possible, because it certainly is possible. And nonetheless, they come here, and this is measured directly against legal migration, for whom I do not think that we provide enough support, quite frankly. Now, Keir Starmer says we've been a soft touch to people coming here for work and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that's the case. Certainly there are businesses that are going to be flouting the rules and all of this sort of stuff. We know that happens. That is a separate problem. The real dealing really should be with the legal routes to come here and what they pay versus those that come here that may well be economic migrants. Now, as I said, I cannot prove to you, and I suggest that the government cannot prove to you conclusively that somebody on an application form is 100% certainly a genuine asylum seeker fleeing war and so on, as against an economic migrant. The reason that I say that is not only because they, to some degree, have to take their word for it on their application, but also they are coming, for the vast majority of them at least, from France, which is a safe place. So yes, they don't have to claim asylum in the first country they arrive at. Yes, the vast majority of them may well stay in France, but they still make that very dangerous journey across the Channel in a small boat, which is inherently dangerous, as we've seen from people losing their lives doing that. They still make that journey across to the UK. So one then has to wonder, why would they do that? Why would they leave a safe country to come to the UK unless there was a real benefit of doing so? And unless, of course, the reason that I've read, which I don't necessarily believe, but the reason that I've read is that they're coming for family connections. Maybe they are, but I do suspect that a lot of them are just coming here as an economic migrant. Personal opinion, and I'm entitled to express that. Now, as for what they pay, if they come across the Channel in a small boat and they claim asylum upon arrival, I think 98% of them, from the statistics that I read, 98% claim asylum the minute they set foot on British soil or sand. They pay nothing for those applications. In fact, the claiming asylum process is all supported. They pay nothing for the application. They are supported whilst they're making that application. They are supported when it's granted or not, and they're supported if it's not granted until they leave, I understand. But then let's compare that directly, as I mentioned, because a few people have asked the questions about the fees, and one person did make a very good point of, if you access NHS services while you're here, that should be considered a benefit. But it's not free. I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's look, first of all, because many people are interested in this, and this is very much the law, so when I get one or two people in the comments saying, oh, this is all politics, it's not. This is law. I genuinely advise clients on this sort of stuff from time to time, and there are lots of legal aspects to this, and I've been through the process myself with my wife, as I mentioned in previous videos. So let's say you get married to somebody who is not a British citizen, not a British subject. There's a subtle distinction between the two, but let's say you're marrying somebody and you want them to come here, and you want them to come here on a spouse visa. Or they are here as a student. You meet them and you fall in love and you want to get married, and then you want them to stay here on a spouse visa. Whatever it is, whether you're applying for a spouse visa or switching to a spouse visa, and whether that is from inside the UK or outside the UK, these are the fees that apply. So we look at switching or applying for a spouse visa. There may be more than one page than this, but this is the one that I'm going to show you. Fees. How much it costs depends on who you're joining and how you apply. So costs of joining your partner, parent, or child, if you're applying from outside the UK, costs £1,846 just for the application. You get a small discount if you're applying in the UK. I'm not really sure why that is. I suppose they have to do further checks if you're outside of the UK or whatever. Then, now this is the bit that you may find a little bit unfair. Costs for each dependent added to your application. So you pay the £1,846. For each child, you add on another £1,846 if you're outside of the UK, or £1,258 if you're within the UK. Costs for adults who need to be looked after by a relative. If you have temporary, key word here, temporary protected status or protection status, which is permission to stay as a refugee or whatever, whilst you are, I suppose, waiting for your application to be decided or such things, then you can apply for this sort of family visa then, and it costs a few £100s on doing so if you're outside the UK. And for some reason, this is the other way round. It's more expensive if you apply from inside the UK. I don't really know why that is. But otherwise, it costs £3,250 if you're applying from outside the UK. So only if you have a protected status, which is temporary, for example, permission to stay as a refugee, I think that's why you're applying. It's much cheaper. Otherwise, if you're an adult who needs to be looked after by a relative and you're applying here, then it costs £3,250 from outside the UK and £1,250 from inside the UK. If you cannot pay the fee, now this is where a few of these things come into play. If you cannot pay the fee, you may be eligible for a fee waiver in certain situations. For example, you can't afford a place to live or your essential living costs. So that would include those where you've come in on a small boat and you can't afford, or you say you can't afford anything, and therefore you get a fee waiver. But now we come on to the bit that somebody said in the comments, a very interesting, genuine question. I don't criticize the person for making the comment, even though I think they made it in a negative way. I'll brush that aside because I'm a big boy. But it's a genuine, interesting question. They say, if you use NHS services, is that not a health benefit? Well, it would be if it was free, but it's not, because there's a health surcharge, which I neglected to mention yesterday. There was far too much, even though I had notes, or the day before, whenever it was. So a health surcharge. You may also need to pay the health surcharge as part of your application. For each adult 18 or over, it costs £2,587.50 if you're staying for 2.5 years, £3,105 if you're staying for 2 years and 9 months, and £5,175 if you're staying for 5 years. The 5-year bit is sort of relevant in a number of situations I'll come back to in other videos. And then for each child, so let's say all of this, bearing in mind, let's say you're a genuine couple, you've married, you've met, and you want to either come here or switch your visa, etc. You have to pay these health surcharges. For each child, which is under 18, obviously you're 18, you become an adult. For each child, £1,940 if you're staying in the UK for 2.5 years, £2,328 for 2 years, 9 months, and £3,880 if you're staying for 5 years. So this is very much not free. So it's not a benefit in that sense. If you want your decision more quickly, an extra £1,000. You can pay another £1,000 to get your decision more quickly. And there's various other things here when you cannot get a visa. But then there's also certain restrictions on this as well. For example, when you cannot get a family visa, so these are additional restrictions. If your family member has a work visa or a student visa, you cannot apply for a family visa if your family member is in the UK temporarily on a work visa or a student visa. They have to leave. Or you have a visitor visa or a visa with 6 months or less, you'll usually need to leave the UK for a family visa if you've got permission to be in the UK as a visitor or your visa is for 6 months or less. However, you may be able to switch to a family visa in the UK if you've got a 6-month family visa as a fiancé or proposed civil partner, or permission to stay in the UK for the outcome of a family court case or divorce. Now, being somewhat cynical here and very, very careful in how I say it, I can very cynically say that it is entirely possible that some people go to the family court and because they take a lot of time to drag these cases out, cynically, it is entirely possible that some people may bring a case to the family court because you can apply for these visas or switch to a family visa, according to this site here, in the UK, if you have an outcome pending in the family court. Now, obviously, I've had situations before now where I've been somewhat dubious as to the real reason that this case is in the family court. And as a professional, I am obligated to ask those questions and press and probe. And obviously, I've never been outright told that that's the reason that they're bringing this case, because that would be an abuse of the system and that would be wrong. But cynically, it is entirely possible that some people are coming to the family court simply because they know that they can switch to a family visa if they're awaiting an outcome of a family court case. Make of that what you will. And there's a lot more to that, and that is just a rather cynical observation, I understand. But then we come on to the financial requirements, which I touched briefly on yesterday or the day before. Now, these have changed somewhat over the years and so on. Someone did remind me in the comments that the police reporting bit disappeared, I think in 2022. So thank you for making that comment. One of my viewers very usefully did. So that requirement disappeared, although the police are still notified about certain things and so on. It's just that requirement to trot off, once every time something changes to the police station disappeared. However, financial requirements. If you apply for a family visa as a partner, you and your partner usually need to prove that your combined income is at least £29,000 a year. Contrasting with you've got no money, so it's all free, but if you want to do this as a family visa, as a spouse visa, what I would call legal migration, and some may say playing by the rules and trying to do everything properly, your combined income must be £29,000 a year. This is the minimum income requirement. And there are, of course, some differences if you get disability or carers benefits and so on and so forth. And finally, there are some arguments, such as human rights arguments, that may stop you coming to the UK if you've got a child here, or otherwise, if you don't meet the financial requirements, the earliest you'll be able to apply for settlement is after 10 years in the UK. Now we compare and contrast that with indefinite leave to remain by what's known as a family reunion. That is where someone has been granted asylum or humanitarian protection here, and you are a member of their family before they were forced to leave that country. If their application is successful, then family members are allowed to come and stay in the UK with the same permission as you. And crucially, there are no fees for applying for a family reunion for eligible family members. Interestingly, under eligibility, it doesn't mention anything to do with financial requirements, income requirements, or etc. It just says your partner and any children must meet the following requirements. Your partner is someone you're in a genuine relationship with. You must be able to prove that you're married or you're in a civil partnership. If you're not married or in a civil partnership, you just prove that you've lived together in a relationship like a marriage or a civil partnership for the last 2 years. Children, if your child is under the age of 18, not married, your child's dependent on you for financial support, etc. They go through all of that, and then, of course, they can apply with no fees whatsoever. It doesn't make clear why there are no fees for that, just that there are, in fact, no fees for it. So the reason that I talk about these things in the way that I do is because these current events and what's going on are very much intertwined with law. This is immigration law. And the government obviously is tweaking and changing those rules all the time, and it affects everybody. But with the vast scale of what's going on here, for example, if we take the ambitious plan of building 1.5 million houses all across the country, and what they're now referring to as grey land, as opposed to green belt, or grey belt versus green belt, this is sort of a subtle way of making you think, well, it's probably okay then. If it's just a car park or it's just a bit of a park that's not really used anymore, then suddenly they might think that that's okay. But 1.5 million houses across the country. Now let's look at some real numbers. Now people might criticize Nigel Farage for throwing numbers out like this, but I've done the maths myself. Let's take their ambitious statistic of doing 1.5 million houses over this parliament of 5 years. Because I don't give them 10 years. I mean, let me know in the comments if you think they'll get another round in. I don't think they'll be able to go for another term after this. I think it will be the biggest wipeout in history, quite frankly. And that's not because I'm an avid conservative or whatever. I don't support what the last 14 years worth of government has done either, for that matter, for those that keep criticizing me for it. I don't. But let's take this 1.5 million houses that they plan to build over this 5 years. You can do the maths yourself. That would be 822 houses every single day, which, if they work around the clock, is one house every 2 minutes. So Nigel Farage is correct. One house every 2 minutes. It takes me longer to make a cup of coffee. So that's not going to happen. So however ambitious they think this is, it's not going to happen. But what they will do is they will literally bulldoze across areas of, well, your estates. So little areas that you might think there's a little bit of green land that you enjoy walking across, walking your dog or just walking around for a while. Make sure you go to the planning portal and you can set up an alert to ping you if there's a planning application in that area. And it will tell you this neighbor or that neighbor is planning to put another bedroom on the top of their house or whatever. Now, if all of you do that and you all get pinged with these houses are popping up everywhere, do let me know and I'll talk about those as well, because I think this is going to affect every village, every city across the country. They are literally going to bulldoze over and make this a building graveyard of grey buildings all over the country. And not only that, looking at the numbers, if we have millions of migrants coming to the UK, again, with the caveat that some genuinely need the help, I am not speaking out against those. This is not to be taken as a criticism or inciting hatred or anything else. There are people in genuine need. This is not against them. This is purely a statistical, numerical challenge here. If there are millions of people coming here who need support because they have no money and they need somewhere to live because they're homeless, and there's a couple of million houses or 1.5 million houses they want to build, it doesn't take much of a leap of imagination as to where they are going to have to live. And Angela Rayner refused to answer the question, flip-flopping from there's a housing crisis to there's plenty of housing to there's plenty of housing but not enough for those that really need it. So was she outright saying that we need to build these houses for migrants? So that translates into, this is not me being a conspiracy theorist or anything else. I'm literally taking their word for it, the statistics for it, the number of people coming in and what they have said. It is entirely likely, if not probable, that these migrants are going to live in houses built in a neighborhood near you. That is not eccentric to say. It's not ridiculous to say, because it's based off what they are saying. And so the reason that I talk about these things in this way is because this law, these decisions, all of this, they're all intertwined. They all very much have an impact on you. And if I were to explain these in a purely boring, technical, legal sense, as I would to a law student, you would not be interested. You would not find it interesting. You may not follow it with respect, because it would be much more technical if it was just that, rather than laying it out as I like to do. And I think there's no need for me to speak in so-called legalese and technical jargon rubbish. In fact, even the courts suggest that we avoid legal technical jargon and say things as they are. Simple example, what has always been referred to in court as a final resolution of the issues in a case, in the matter of the case. All that means is you get a judgment, you get a decision. Someone wins and someone loses. That is the final resolution. It's been decided, it's been adjudicated upon, and even then it can go to appeal, but we digress. So all of these things very much do affect you. Now let's talk about how they might affect big corporates and things like that. Employer national insurance. A lot of people think and have commented against previous videos that they don't care about big companies, they don't care about corporates, that's up to them, let them pay the money, they say. But that will affect people, not only because it's going to affect prices, and they've already said prices are going to go up. Currys has just yesterday, I think I read, Currys has said we're going to increase prices because we can't swallow all these costs. Employers will lower wages to cover those costs as well over time. And by lower, I mean they won't increase them. But also, this does affect you, because if the big corporate's bottom line is affected, this is obviously going to affect pensions, because many pensions and investments are tied to those big companies, whether you manage them or not. You may not even, with respect, you may not even realize that your pension may be tied to these big companies. Many pensions, are based on US companies as opposed to UK companies. But by the by, a lot of pensions are tied to UK companies and their performance. So whether or not you're a farmer, whether you're a business owner, whether you've got children in private school, which is a whole other issue, they still haven't, from what I've read, yesterday they refused to do this full impact assessment because I think they're afraid of what it will show as to just how devastating this is going to be, with children being cut halfway through their GCSE years. But even if you don't have children in private school, and even if you don't have a family member trying to come here on a spouse visa and all that sort of stuff, or you're not trying to buy a house, and if none of that applies to you and you still think these events don't apply to you, then they very much do, because wherever you live, it may affect your local area, and wherever your pension is, it may affect that. Whatever your pension money is, it may well affect that. There was subtle rumours the other day about them being means tested, and that the whole thing is now under threat. And talk about doctor's appointments. 10 years ago, you could ring up and easily get a doctor's appointment. Now you're lucky to get one on the same day. You're lucky if they answer the phone. And I recently know someone that couldn't get an appointment on the phone, so they rang 111 and they were told that they were going to call back and didn't. They were desperately ill, and they just didn't call back. Quite clearly, they didn't have the capacity to call back. So all of these things very much do affect everybody. And on another note, and this is a bit of a general caveat here, when I tell you about these things, it's not necessarily that I am for or against one point, or even for or against an individual that I speak about. Yesterday, I spoke of Tommy Robinson. He's been ordered to pay £50,000 on account, with the remaining to be assessed. Somebody left a message. Now, again, I don't criticise unduly here, but somebody left a message to say they are unsubscribing from me because they didn't like the fact that Tommy Robinson had to pay these costs, and they thought that I'm being against Tommy Robinson because I'm telling you about it, and that he's being questioned by police and so on. I'll link yesterday's video if you missed it. But I didn't say that I support him or I don't support him. In fact, it doesn't matter. Many of you probably don't know whether I support him or not. Even when I had him on the channel and the video got banned, well, flagged and limited at least, even when I had him on the channel, I didn't say whether I support him or not. I'm sure he doesn't care whether I support him or not. It's all a case of free and open discussion. And so I had him on the channel to let him have his say. There's enough people saying what they like about him. I brought him on the channel so that he had an opportunity to say what he wanted to say. That's sort of what an advocate does. You will find me very often arguing for a point of view, regardless whether I agree with it or not. And that's regardless of being personally and professionally instructed or not. Obviously, if you're professionally instructed on a case, you argue for that point of view. It doesn't matter you agree with the point of view or not. And likewise, if I'm giving you a point of view on here, such as, in my opinion, the number of migrants coming to this country is going to have a devastating impact across the country, that is not me saying that all of these migrants are a bad thing, and it's not me saying that we shouldn't help them, and it's not me saying that they don't need help and it's not genuine and so on. It's just another perspective. And you can hold that opinion regardless of being adverse to the people against whom you're making that opinion, if that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if that did come across properly, because I don't script my videos, I never have, and I hope that comes across properly. But when I give you these views and these points of view, it is not necessarily that I am for or against one side. I am laying it out because too many people will not say what they really think. They will not say what's really going on. They're afraid to say certain things. They're afraid to speak out against certain things. They're afraid, for example, to speak out against religious extremism and things like that. Now, I have friends of many different faiths, so I have nothing against any other faith or another, but I am against extremism, whatever faith that comes from. And so I will speak out against that. And so I think people are afraid of speaking out against it for fear of being labelled racist in general across the board, which obviously is unfair and not true. In fact, even when I don't really give you opinions, or whether I give you an opinion or not, I've had complaints to my regulator. None of them have been upheld, I'm pleased to say. Each of them have had a form of words that I'm entitled to my opinions and express my opinions under my Article 10 rights. Obviously, I wouldn't be discriminatory and racist and all those kind of things. And speaking out against something is none of those things. Somebody even complained to my regulator when I told you about the changes in the highway code that was to put pedestrians and cyclists above drivers in the hierarchy, which I agree with, but I also think it's going to cause chaos, which is what I said in the original video. and it doesn't work. I said I don't think it will work, and that was a year, 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago now, and it doesn't work. From my personal experience, I can now say it doesn't work. How do I know? Because I've been the pedestrian. I've tested this. I've been standing at the side of the road and I've gone to cross. I've put one foot in the road as though I'm about to cross, and the driver's just pulled out in front of me, looked at me as if to say, don't you dare cross the road. And they've pulled out in front of me. Now, according to the Highway Code update, I had priority because I looked like I was about to cross the road. And so if you're a driver turning into or out of a road across which it appears that a pedestrian is about to cross or is in the process of crossing, the driver should stop and give priority. Well, guess what? 9 times out of 10, they don't. Once or twice, because I've tested this a lot over the last couple of years, because I wanted to be able to come back to you to tell you whether this works or not. It doesn't work. For the vast majority, it doesn't work. I said in that video it would be chaos. The point of all this is someone complained to my regulator saying that they didn't like my opinion because I said it was going to be chaos, these new changes to the Highway Code. That's just my opinion. And as it turns out, I was right, because it is chaos. It doesn't work. Had I crossed, there'd have been this whole possibly collision. Who knows? But if I assumed that I will get priority and just walk out, there'll be this confrontation at the very least. So with that, I hope you found this somewhat useful, somewhat entertaining. And of course, it is most certainly about the law, but it incorporates news and current events. So with that, I hope you enjoy this frank approach. If you do, please do like the video and subscribe. I'm aiming for 1 million subscribers. That is very much a goal of mine. So at least in some sense, in my heart, I feel that I've helped 1 million people. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.